Let me tell you a little bit about myself so you know who's actually standing here. I'm founder myself. I established various businesses in various, I would say, regions of the world as, for example, first web design studio in Kampala in Africa, one of the first internet portals actually in East Africa, and also some analytics companies in Australia, New Zealand, and United States. Recently, which is like maybe 2 years ago, I sold one of the big data company, which was funded by Index Ventures, which is a top-tier investment fund in London, and decided to step off a bit on the other side of the table, which is funding, which is to better understand the VC landscape. And currently, we're running a small 10 million VC fund and based in Prague, and we support various companies, usually in the stage of seed, between seed and Series A. And before I start talking, I would love to ask you, actually, who and if you ever talk to an investor or have this kind of idea of actually launching your own business by using investors' money. Is there anybody like that? If you can raise your hands. 1, 2 out of the whole audience. Okay, so that's like a pretty low percentage. And all the other guys, have anybody actually has a dream to launch their own business? Okay, that's better. Cool. So this session, I would love to give you a little bit of insight on how these guys actually think in terms of teams and products, okay? And it's my own experience, and it's kind of a best practice. So let's start on how we actually diversify types of investors, because they all differ and they all have different goals. And I give you a little bit of description for each of these roles. And it's very important for you to understand that each of these guys have different aspirations, and they require different things also when we talk about the product development. So the first types are angels. These are the people who actually saw their own company maybe once or twice, and they're trying to get back on their feet with some younger team, and then they kind of roll up the sleeve and they help you out with the company to build it up. And they are one of the most ones who actually do understand the product. So most of these guys are from your industry or from the industry where you are actually heading. These guys you usually find in accelerators. I think you have some in Belarus or in certain like angel circles, so where people actually gather and talk about business. In the West, there are established networks of angels you can contact and ask them for a like initial investment, which is usually between 30, 50K, 50,000 euros, and it's for validation of the idea, I would say so. So these guys, they bring the know-how of the industry, and they tell you a lot if actually that particular dream can come true in that particular industry. Second type, seed guys, more like us. So for us, it's more about company building. It's more about assessing the particular roles in the company, choosing really professionals. So the problem usually is fixed because you're creating a solution, right, to fix the problem, and you're actually building up something that is more professional. So you need different roles in the company. It's not just about founders. It's not just about idea. It's more about, to get a proper marketing guy, to get a first sales guy there in a team, to get or start certain partnerships and kind of create, and that's our main responsibility, create an established relationship with people who are called Series A investors. I would call the Series A and Series B investors to the same group, because these guys I basically used for, okay, let's go back a little bit. Seed stage investors, they usually give you up to between 100 and 500K money, and Series A and Series B investors usually give you between 1 and 3 million. These money are used mainly for building up partnerships, opening up certain new markets. After that, we have this IPO, or it can continue Series A, B, C, D. And these guys are used for, I would say, consolidation of the markets, creating joint ventures, creating what is called M&A. Does anybody know what M&A is? Merge and acquisitions. So before the company can scale, or if the product doesn't resonate much on the market, there are other companies who can actually buy these companies because of the technology, because of the people, because of the revenue. So beyond Series B investors and M&A advisory investors are used in this kind of deals. There is this magic word which is called the IPO, which is initial public offering. It's like going public. It's going to the NASDAQ. It's going to the public markets, asking for money from people like you. I put one term here, which is algorithmic VC. It's a specific kind of investor. Basically, these guys, it's called the spray and pray guys. So they usually work in terms that they assemble a lot of data from like Crunchbase or AngelList platforms, and they assign certain amount per each company the same. For example, Kima Ventures from France work like this. So they don't care about the stage, they don't care about the team, they don't care about the valuation. They just give you 150K per each company, and they do maybe 10 deals per week. Second thing, which is maybe more related to you. This is the way we look at the products in different stages, and it's the best practice what you can see on how to build a scalable product. So most of the first row is actually the validation that the team can stay together and building things which are not used for anything, I would say. Okay, so there is no direct line between the wheel and the car, and usually most companies, they die on the way if they don't figure out on how it is actually to build a car. The second one, it's for more mature companies, more mature founders who do understand that it's actually really important to build a product which is used by users, which is like the bike on your left side, but it's actually not the thing what we give you money for, because we're still talking about the car, right? So most companies also, they kind of pivot and they find different business use cases. So actually from the same product can be different product lines. The third one, and I like it the most, is like a perfect sense of understanding what it actually takes to build that particular car. And you have to have certain parts funded by certain types of investors. What usually happens, and this is the joke and everybody should smile, but maybe it's, oh, sorry. Oh, that's very important because it's a beer can. So this we see quite often when we fund the companies, that actually people got really excited by the feature or by the product of their own child, right? And when the founder comes back to the investor is the lady which is kind of crying that actually all the money has been spent in the wrong way. And the founder is trying to convince the investor that actually it's a good idea because we're going to have this forever and the life will be beautiful. But he's actually forgetting one thing, that maybe nobody cares about the beer at all. Comparison between roadmaps, it's also something what I usually recommend to founders to be aware of. Most of the founders or technical co-founders like the CTOs and the product guys are very much aware about the tools, about the technology, about the development team, what kind of roles they need, you know, how the product has to be structured, how the UI has to be kind of interacted with the users. But most of them are not anyhow related on how the business actually should be conducted. So I would really, really recommend that as soon as you start to build something, you have to be aware on where actually the company goes. So what are the milestones we have to hit? What are the milestones we have promised to the investor or to our initial set of customers? How much capital we are actually burning here, and what are the priorities? And priorities is the bottom line, which can be all different things. You know, the priority is not, for example, that the product doesn't, let's say, stand 100,000 of queries per second. It might be the simplicity, it might be the time, the delivery capabilities, complexity or performance, or UI perspective. So in different stages of the company, different stages of the product, there are different priorities. Usually technical people think only about the scale, robustness, let's say the speed, performance, and this kind of technical stuff. But these might not be needed if there is no user on the platform. Okay? I'm not sure whether you usually discuss this with marketing people, but usually the role should be kind of handled from both sides. So the product owners should have a head, or the marketing person should have a head, and vice versa from each other. This is just one saying that from the very beginning, even though you don't have any certain KPIs of the usage, you should start to measure everything what you can and see where does this go. Obviously, this is quite simplistic overview. The more data you have, the better product you have, the more you understand your customers, and the better product you can have, and the more revenue you can have, okay? People usually ask on what metrics should we measure if there is nothing actually happening in a place. I mean, if it's like initial phase of the product development. What we suggest are these things, which you, I think, already heard over time today. But I would just highlight one of the most important ones, which is Net Promoter Score, which is a term which basically says if you actually recommend the particular service or the product to someone else. And if the score is on the scale from 1 to 10, and if the score is below 8, you should start thinking on how to change the product. Customer lifetime value, it's basically the money you can get out of the customer throughout the whole customer journey. Acquisition cost, how much money does it cost you to get the customer you don't know which exists. Monthly revenue, yearly revenue, that's obvious. Revenue per the segment of the customer, we'll be talking in a while, or per particular customer. And the pirate metrics, I'm not sure whether you heard about this. It's a Dave McClure from 500 Startups, kind of a classic funnel on how the customer journey actually looks like. This is an example on how particular dashboard in the company can look like. It's taken from friends in a Kiko board. As you can see, you have all from the top funnel down to the revenue. It can be structured all different ways. You have NPS score, acquisition for the customer as well. I think most of these metrics should be accessible for all the company, and we strongly suggest to have this, in front of eyes of every time you went to the office, so everybody knows where do you actually stand and can kind of year to year, month to month track the progress. This is quite an interesting slide, just to give you a benchmark on how, let's say, usual VC or usual investors see the traction in the company and in different stages. So you have the seed and Series A companies, particular revenue and the breaks, where it breaks, and how much money actually you can get. This is from, I would say, Western Europe. Maybe here the valuations and deal sizes would be a little bit different. But anyway, if you do business from here, anyway, you should match this benchmark to the companies in the West. So if you're asking for $2 million, basically you have to have a product and you have to have a revenue roughly around 100K a month from the product. Otherwise, the VC will put you, we call it horses, and there are different types of horses. This means different types of companies. And as soon as you are a horse which doesn't perform, you are out of the focus for the investor, basically out of the game until you reach the second or the third stage. Another example as a benchmark, if you look at this graph, which basically tells you how long it takes you to get to the paradise. And the paradise roughly starts when you earn 100K a year. There are other graphs for $1 million, for $2 million, $5 million annual recurrent revenue. And as you can see, it takes roughly one and a half year for an average SaaS company to hit this from the launch to the revenue. So again, it's a benchmark. If you're not hitting 100K, you can't ask for money to move on to the next stage. I mean, you can, obviously, but investors will be very reluctant because they have many deals and they will compare it to you about this. What we also suggest on a journey of understanding your customer is basically to segment them. And these are particular segments you can do. Obviously, you can do the segments on the churn, lifetime value acquisition costs, revenue per customer, revenue per particular industry, location size. But what I want to talk about are those two last, actually, because these are quite obvious. Does anybody know what the RFM stands for? It's actually the way customers behave towards your particular product. R stands for recency, which is what was the last time somebody actually interacted with you. F is frequency, it's how many times that particular person interacted with you in certain time frame. And M is monetary, so how much value you actually put on that particular relationship. This can be used as your overall lifestyle, whatever, religion. Because by this you can judge almost anything you do in life. If it's your Facebook friends, if it's your friends in inner circles with the family, you know, how many times you see your friends, what was the last time you saw the guy, and how much value the relationship basically brings you. You can build the whole company in this. It's a very powerful metric, and it can be calculated in terms of score. So the highest score RFM is actually your VIP customers, and the lowest score are your customers you basically don't care. Not every customer has the same value. When you do this segmentation, it will open up like three different, like it's three-dimensional cube basically, and you have your, like, I would say, different segments based on how actually people treat you. Not because where they live, not because how much money you earn, but this model actually tells you what's going to happen in the future as well. And the Pareto rule, obviously, 80-20, it's kind of a saying that most of the customers or most of the relationship you have in life are most valuable in you. You usually don't see that much. I got two graphs here, pretty similar, but a lot different in a sense. It's just that get you thinking that actually there is a big difference when people who are actually using your product and taking time to not use it anymore. And it actually differs, I think I will explain just this one. So it actually differs when they're coming back. So all the game in our VC world is about retention actually. So when people don't come back to your product and they just do the sign up, you spend a lot of money for acquisition costs and marketing and sales efforts, even if it's B2B, even if it's B2C. We don't want to see throwing money away out of the window, so usually we push a lot for retention higher than 25% or 50% over time. And it's called stickiness, and Google has this kind of really nice saying, and if the product doesn't resonate like a toothbrush, you should not do it. And the toothbrush people usually use twice a day, right? So if people don't use your app on a regular basis and it's on the page 5 of your mobile phone, it's a dead app. So these are usual questions we ask. Product market fit basically means, anybody use it? Do you solve a real problem? Can we repeat that cycle? Second one, growing fast, what it means. Growing fast means $100 million in 5 years, which is this T2D3, triple-double, which means 100 divided by 2, 50 divided by 2, 25 divided by 3, 7, 3, $1 million in revenue per year. And if you don't fit in this, so 1, 3, 7, 25, 50, 100, you're not running enough fast. Efficiency, basically, if you put the dollar in a way that actually helps up to speed up the revenue, retention for the customers I already spoke about. Last slide. Investors do it from these purposes. Okay, we don't do this because we fall in love with you. We don't do this maybe even for your product. We do this because of this. So we either want our money back from the IPO and let the market decide on how the actual value of the company will behave on the public markets. We do it because somebody else can buy the company and give us a return, and we help you to do that. We do it because you can find the money even though you don't go to public markets. There are private markets, you can find the money. So again, we can get our return. We do it because we can have a dividends, we can have a good life out of this and milk the company. There are two types of companies actually. It's called milking the cow. So we got a monthly retainer, we got a success fee, we got basically money for free. Or there is another cow which you can kill. So you either have a cow for milk or you either have a cow for meat. And the meat is the M&A or the meat is the IPO. Or we do it, and that goes back to the first slide, because we want to move in a human chain of investors. So Angel usually wants to become a seed investor. He needs to have certain exits, certain, let's say, success criteria for himself. Seed investor want to become Series A want to become M&A. An M&A guy, most of these guys are off the table. That's all for this, for now, and I'm open if you have any questions. Thank you for your attention.
Daniel, we have time for several questions.
Okay, finally my microphone. Thank you for presentation. Could you please go back to the previous slide and give the examples of the, I don't know, popular companies that use some of these strategies, if you can, for all of this?
Initial public offering, we got Shopify. It's a very good title to go in. Merchant acquisitions. Most of the cyber security companies, merchant acquisitions usually happens a lot in fields of B2B. Okay. Public offering, mostly marketplaces, e-commerce companies. So you just need money to fund your AdWords campaigns. For that, you don't need, investors' money. Cash cows, a little bit complicated. I would say B2B companies maybe combined with the companies which goes IPOs, but these are really big ones. Venture capital, any company.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions, guys?
Anybody who wants to become an investor? Do you know how to become an investor? Do you think you need money to become an investor? Who thinks you need money to become an investor? Who thinks you don't need money to become an investor? You are right, guys. Okay? Becoming an investor is very easy. You just write a title on your LinkedIn profile. No, I'm honest here. Not the way I do it, but the point is that if you are relevant and you build up your name and you become a good scout just by saying, then you become relevant and then people will listen to you. And at the second stage, they give you the trust and then they give you money. You see? Because having money doesn't make you a good investor, and having no money doesn't make you a bad investor. So, how many once you become investor now? So if there is any last question.
I have a question.
Okay.
So what do you think about bootstrapping your business, and what is your recommendation when's the best time to look for the first round?
Have you noticed I haven't used, I think there was no word of profitability, EBITDA, and this kind of stuff, right? So that's partially the bootstrapping things. I think when you are between 20, 35-ish, it's good to build your business, bootstrap business, because most of the time you basically sell your time, but when you grow older, you kind of dedicate your time to different priorities. So you have to do smarter, faster steps, and for that you need, I think, external cash, and maybe burn a little bit more than just to do it for the profit. And it's also good to try both sides. You know, I was having businesses which were very profitable, but I couldn't move to the next phase just to learn what it takes to build a company in San Francisco, and I wouldn't move to San Francisco if I would be doing just profitable businesses. So if you do profitable business, you sell your company for revenue. And actually, this thing is the most, I mean, it's the least valuation is the revenue, actually. Because the revenue multiple is maybe 1 or 2 years. So basically, if you're having a development agency, 50 people, 50 million euros a year, you can't sell it more than for 50, right? But I'm more fan of having 15 people, having great technology, and sell it for 100. That's what you can do.
Thank you. Any questions, guys? No. And just in one sentence, your inspirational speech inspire Belarusians and everybody who's in this audience to be an entrepreneur.
What I see from the region, I'm Czech origin as well. I mean, not as well as you, but I'm like Eastern European as well. That's what I wanted to say. But I left the country when I was 17. So I let my balls grow with the confidence and with like how the world actually works. And I would really, really recommend it to you as well. Don't cut your own wings just by saying, okay, we've never done entrepreneurship, we've never done any business with VCs. You got internet, you got all doors open. I think you have very good talent here. I mean, in the whole Eastern Europe, there's a really good pool of talents. Just don't get yourself trapped that if our parents doesn't do it, we can't do it. I think you can do it. There are great examples from this country, like Flow or One Soil and all these companies, yeah. Cool.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you very much.